Friends, where our solar system ends, there begins the Kuiper Belt.
And in the Kuiper Belt, if any object is the largest, that's Pluto.
Pluto is actually a place where sunlight reaches less than 1%, and the temperature goes below 2 degrees Celsius, so cold that it would freeze even your bones. So let's just imagine that Pluto is in a place where there's darkness, cold, and perhaps much more, which we'll discuss in great detail in today's video. Yes, friends, today's video will be on Pluto. Ever since I started making videos on space, I've always said in my videos that there are 8 planets in our solar system. Because if we look it up on Google, there are 8 planets, and Mercury is first and Neptune last.
Now we have the question, what became of Pluto?
Where is Pluto?
Isn't Pluto in our solar system?
Did you forget Pluto? And friends, if there are 8 planets in the solar system, then where the heck is Pluto? So, to all of you, I'll just say this. Don't worry, because in today's video, you're going to get answers to all these questions. Maybe individuals simply desire to understand what happened to Pluto and why it is no longer considered a planet. Individuals have too many questions in their minds regarding Pluto, and if we must find answers to all these questions, we will have to start the story of Pluto anew. So that means we'll have to go back in time and discuss the entire history of Pluto, from its discovery to its demotion, in detail. So as always, this video is going to be very interesting, which is why you're going to watch it till the end. Thus, dear friends, if we talk of Pluto for a full 76 years, Pluto was considered a planet. When Pluto was first discovered in 1930, it was declared the 9th planet. And from 1930 to 2006, 76 full years, it was numbered as a planet. Thus, if you went to school before 2006, you definitely learned in your school books that there are 9 planets in the solar system and that the 9th one is Pluto. Well, Pluto was in the list of planets for decades, so it can be hard for people to get used to the fact that Pluto is no longer considered a planet. Friends, in 2006, Pluto was removed from the planet list and was officially declared a dwarf planet.
To put it in simple terms, Pluto is not a planet anymore, it's an asteroid.
So how and why did that happen? Let's know more about it a little more clearly.
Friends, this discovery story began in 1905 because in 1905, there was a scientist named Percival Lowell.
He believed that Neptune was not the final planet, and there existed a final planet beyond it, which was not visible to us until then. While studying the orbits of Uranus and Neptune, he believed that some object was disturbing their orbits. And that thing, he used to believe, was a giant planet, which he referred to as Planet X. Anyways, he wanted to discover Planet X, but sadly he died, and his discovery remained incomplete. Friends, Percival Lowell also possessed an observatory called the Lowell Observatory. He passed away in 1915, and from 1915 to 1929, 14 complete years, the astronomers in his observatory were unable to find Planet X. Well, 14 years passed like that. And then in 1929, a new astronomer came named Clyde Tombaugh. Friends, Clyde Tombaugh was a young astronomer, and what no one was able to do in 14 years, find Planet X, he did. Yes, friends, Clyde Tombaugh found Planet X. He observed the stars in the sky with a telescope for a whole year, trying to spot a moving star. Because if a star is moving, it's not a star, it's a planet. Stars remain stationary where they are, but planets do not. So, Clyde Tombaugh spent a year studying the stars patiently, and in January 1930, at last, he discovered a star which was changing its position. He initially believed perhaps it would be an error, but when he took a picture of that star for several days, he realized it wasn't a star, it was a planet. Because it was not fixed, it was moving from point to point. So he eventually found a moving star, and that's where Planet X originated. Friends, Planet X had now been discovered, but the problem was that astronomers did not yet have a name for it. They had lots of suggestions, including Cronus, Atlas, Persephone, Prometheus, and so on. They had lots of names, but none of them quite felt right for this planet. Following several suggestions, the one they liked best was Pluto. Friends, cool fact is that this name originated from an 11-year-old girl named Venetia Burney. Venetia had the opinion that the name Pluto would be apt for this planet. In Roman mythology, the god who governed the underworld was Pluto. And if you take a look at Planet X, It's located in a place that's something of an underworld, the Kuiper Belt. If you have never heard of the Kuiper Belt, let me tell you, outside of Neptune, there's a region in which trillions of objects orbit the Sun in a circular pattern. They range from asteroids, comets, and dwarf planets to icy boulders and much, much more. We call this region the Kuiper Belt, and if the largest object within the Kuiper Belt exists, it is Pluto. Hence, it will not be wrong to relate the Kuiper Belt with an underworld and its king being Pluto. So, Planet X got the name of Pluto, and was declared in 1930 to be the 9th planet of the solar system. Well, the solar system's 9th planet was discovered, but no one even had an inkling of this planet's size. So, friends, when we talk about the size of Pluto, initially scientists thought that Pluto was actually bigger than Earth, perhaps even as big as Uranus or Neptune. But friends, it wasn't the case. With more studies being conducted on Pluto, it became clear that Pluto is not bigger than Earth, and it's not even bigger than Earth. In fact, it's smaller than our moon. Yes, friends, Pluto is about half the size of our moon. If we put the size of Pluto into perspective compared to the size of Earth, Earth's width is 6 times that of Pluto's. And if you were to fill Pluto's into Earth, about 170 Plutos would fit nicely inside. So you can probably just imagine how small Pluto is. That's the size of Pluto. Now let's talk about its distance. Friends, if we talk about distance, Pluto is so far away that even today's powerful telescopes cannot take its pictures well. Pluto is 7.4 billion kilometers or 49.4 astronomical units from the Sun. If you have no idea what an astronomical unit is, let me enlighten you. For scientific measurement, the Sun-Earth distance is 1 astronomical unit. Thus, since Pluto is 49 astronomical units from the Sun, it's 49 times farther away from the Sun than Earth is. And as I was saying, Pluto is that far away that even telescopes these days can barely get its pictures properly. These are photographs of Pluto taken by the Hubble telescope. You can see how fuzzy Pluto is. Neither its color nor its shape is clearly delineated. That is why scientists were struggling to study Pluto, and they knew that if they were going to study it, they'd have to send a special spaceship to Pluto. So keeping that in mind, they designed a special spaceship called New Horizons. New Horizons is the only spaceship till date who visited Pluto. It was specifically designed to go to Pluto, take clear images, and help us view it. When New Horizons reached Pluto and took pictures of it, they looked a bit like these. You can see on the pictures how bright Pluto's color is and how all the features are recognizable. Friends, New Horizons was sent in 2006 and reached Pluto in 2015, i.e., it took 9 whole years to reach Pluto. What it saw during its 9-year-long journey is a huge topic, which we'll discuss in detail in a future video. So let's move on. Friends, while New Horizons is the only spacecraft to visit Pluto, before it, Voyager 1 and Voyager 2 were also launched to study the gas giants of our solar system. Voyager 1 studied Jupiter and Saturn, while Voyager 2 studied Uranus and Neptune. The truth is, if scientists wanted to, they could have also sent Voyager 1 or 2 to Pluto. But this idea did not come to them at that moment. Instead of sending them to Pluto, they sent both spacecraft into interstellar space. Friends, we all know that Pluto is 7.4 billion kilometers from the Sun. That is so vast a distance that sunlight reaches Pluto, less than 1% of it only. That is why Pluto has a dark sky, so that even during the daytime you would see stars. And if we are talking about temperature, Pluto is colder than every other planet. While the minimum temperature of Uranus is 224 degrees Celsius, and that of Neptune is 214 degrees Celsius, the minimum temperature of Pluto is 233 degrees Celsius, and thus it's the coldest among all. Friends, you'd be surprised to know that orbits of all planets in our solar system are not exactly circular. Theirs elliptical. That is, all the planets travel along an egg-like orbit, rather than a circular one, that we call an elliptical orbit. The orbit of each and every planet is very slightly elliptical, but the orbit of Pluto is not merely slightly elliptical, it's extremely elliptical. In fact, it's so elliptical that sometimes Pluto comes closer to the Sun than Neptune and becomes the 8th planet. Let me explain how this happens. When Pluto is at the farthest point in its orbit from the Sun, its distance is 7.4 billion kilometers. This is called aphelion. And when it's at the closest point to the Sun, its distance is 4.4 billion kilometers. This is called perihelion. Now Pluto takes the lead over Neptune because Neptune is 4.5 billion kilometers away from the Sun, and Pluto is 4.4 billion kilometers away from the Sun. This has happened earlier too. Between February 1979 and February 1999, for 20 whole years, Pluto took the lead over Neptune and became the 8th planet of the solar system, which is really interesting. Similarly, if we take rotation into consideration, Pluto revolves in the clockwise direction, as does Venus and Uranus, whereas all the other planets move in the counterclockwise direction. Friends, despite Pluto being so much smaller in size compared to Mercury and Venus, there's one thing that Mercury and Venus don't possess, but Pluto does: moons. Yes, friends, whereas Mercury and Venus don't even have a single moon, Pluto has 5 of them: Nix, Styx, Hydra, Kerberos, and the most special of them all, Charon. Charon is Pluto's largest moon, and it dances around Pluto. Charon orbits around Pluto, yet Charon makes Pluto orbit around Charon too. This is because Charon is large. Charon is approximately half as large as Pluto. Because of this, Charon's gravity affects Pluto considerably, and the two orbit one another. While reading this, I also discovered another interesting thing. Had Pluto not been a planet today, it would have possibly been a moon of Neptune. The majority of scientists believe that once both Pluto and Triton approached Neptune, Pluto escaped, but Triton was trapped by Neptune's gravity and became its moon. So if Pluto had become stuck in Neptune's orbit, it might have been a moon like Triton today. Well, friends, there's still lots more to tell about Pluto, but I think the video would get too long and you would be bored. So let's not make it take forever and get to the answer to your question. Why is Pluto no longer a planet? Let's talk about Pluto's downgrade. Friends, from 1930 to 2006, 76 years, Pluto existed as a planet. But Pluto was removed from the planet roster in 2006. Why? Let's find out. The fact is, apart from Pluto, there are plenty of other objects which might have been planets. For example, there is Ceres. This dwarf planet is located in the asteroid belt between Jupiter and Mars. Why can't it also be a planet? Other than that, in the Kuiper belt there are many other objects and dwarf planets orbiting the Sun, like Eris, Haumea, Makemake, etc. If all of them were planets, then the solar system would have so many planets that it'd be hard even to remember their names. Keeping this in view, in the year 2006, the International Astronomical Union, IAU, decided that they'd set some conditions. Only such an object would meet all these criteria to be called a planet. Those criteria were: 1. The object must be a celestial body and orbit around the Sun, and Pluto does. 2. It must have enough mass to shape itself into almost a circular form, and Pluto does as well. 3. It shouldn't be a moon, and Pluto isn't. 4. The fourth criterion, its orbit must have a clear neighborhood. Now, what is clear neighborhood? I didn't get it at first either, but after a fair amount of research I did. It is that the planet must be able to sustain enough gravity to keep its orbit free, i.e., it must be able to throw out any object, like an asteroid or dwarf planet, from its orbit with its gravity. Well, Pluto was unable to meet this requirement. Pluto does not have enough gravity to clear its orbit, and because of this, in 2006, it was removed from the list of planets and reclassified as a dwarf planet, a planet that is missing one or more of these requirements. So if you have Pluto as the 9th planet in your books, you might be disappointed now, as this little Pluto was a favorite when they are young. That's it for today. I'll see you in the next video.